Greetings, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com, and I'm finally pretty much completed the IAAPA coverage as I published here on ArcadeHeroes.com. New games planning for 2024, wrapping up IAAPA 2023, where it gets into all of the games that at least I saw or am aware of that were at the show. I guess now I'm realizing I did miss out on a couple of Chinese manufacturers there, so I'll have to go back and add those in. But this live stream is so that we can discuss all of the stuff that happened at IAAPA, as well as what's coming to arcades next year. So feel free to throw your questions out to me in the chat, and I will be happy to do what I can to answer them, at least to the best of my knowledge. And if I get anything horribly wrong, well, you can admonish me, flog me, whatever it is that you need to do. But I'll try and correct the record in the event that something is incorrect. But generally basing it off of to the best of my knowledge, as well as maybe some what I recall hearing. But in my old age, I sometimes forget a thing here and there, so forgive me for that, or I misheard something at the show. But I'm hydrated. Hope you're hydrated as well. So let's jump into it, and I've got the chat up here on the side, so anytime you want to throw some questions out or just chat, remember, if you're a member to the channel, thank you. But you can also use special emojis that others cannot use, so those are always fun. Alright, to get started, as I want to do in more recent times, I'm giving those who advertise, sponsor the site, attention first for these shows, just to help them get their money's worth, I guess. But the longest running advertiser on the site would be Roth Thrills. And yeah, you can see their ad on the side there. If I was to zoom out, there's Wallop, there's Roth Thrills. But I thank them for supporting the site these many, many years and giving me information as well so that I get accurate things out. There was one inaccurate thing that I put out about Godzilla Kaiju Wars when I posted a video on that, but the record should have been corrected now. I can't remember what it was at this point. But, oh yeah, I should mention this, is that I'm at my arcade right now. It's very dead for Monday in December. So some of you might have seen that I mentioned that business has been poor this year. It started off pretty good at the beginning of the year, and then it fell down. There was a nice blip in the middle of the summer, but it went back down to where it had been going, and it's just been kind of a slow, steady decline since. Last month, November, was the worst month that I have experienced this whole year, and I have never, ever, in all the years that I've been doing this, 15 and a half now, had a November that performed the worst in the year up until now. And so, don't know why that is. Hopefully, if there are any operators in chat or that are watching this, hopefully business is going better for you guys. I have heard from a few out there that they've also been seeing some signs that things have not been going great. And so, yeah, that's a little bit concerning. But let me jump ahead on this video here. If you didn't see it already, this was my walk around of the Roth Thrills booth. I'm going to turn the sound off so that I'm not trying to talk over myself. But we had, of course, the big thing for Roth Thrills was Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR. Just on an aside, I went and saw Godzilla -1 last week with my son, and I didn't even know anything about it other than it's a Godzilla movie, and I was blown away. It's actually like the best movie of the year, which I was not expecting to say about anything Godzilla ever. But maybe that's just a testament to how lousy most movies have been this year, but it was just fantastically well done. And I mean, out of Godzilla movies, I haven't seen most of them, but all out of those I have seen, it's also the best Godzilla movie ever. So anyways, Godzilla Kaiju War is not out yet, so if it was, it could be capitalizing on that hype from Godzilla -1, I guess. But I guess I'll have to wait until Godzilla vs. Kong 2 next year. Anyways, we had the new standard version of Fast and Furious there. Had Minecraft. Excuse me, I guess I shouldn't be drinking carbonated drinks. They don't have Series 3 out yet. They did say probably next spring, so I would say Amusement Expo is when we can expect to see that. Had a little Nitro Trucks here. This is one of those games that just kind of got the shaft due to when it was released. It was released in 2020, and so that was just bad timing on that part. It's a fine game. I don't know how well it earns, though. But Super Bikes 3, the illustrious follow-up to Super Bikes 2. MotoGP VR, which came out this past summer. And, yeah, July 2023. And better graphics, new updates to the roster and such of the MotoGP circuit. You have Halo Fireteam Raven 4-player. Now, when they showed this off last year, they were saying that they were going to introduce a 2-player version, but it wasn't at this show. Still haven't seen it, so I don't know when, if that is happening at all. And then we had more Kaiju Wars VR here. If you didn't catch videos about this, I assume you might have by now. This is a lot like Gunblade NY by Sega, just the way that it feels and flows. I mean, I also mentioned I would not mind it if they release a non-VR version of this, as it would fall right into that Gunblade category, and that's something that I would be able to afford picking up, just because the cost on this, and as it is now, would not get that doesn't fit my budget as to what I can afford. We had Fast and Furious Deluxe, and as well as the standard over there, and I'm not aware of any software changes, content updates, anything like that. It's just a new, more affordable cabinet. King Kong of Skull Island 2, which is something that adds more, or 2 more levels to it. It has a slingshot maneuver in it now, but I didn't see anybody doing that. And then the new update to Big Buck Hunter. I've been waiting for my Big Buck update to arrive in the mail. I was told that you can download it off of coinup.com, but I've lost my information. I need to find my info for logging in again there. But just to check with the chat really quick, can you guys hear me okay? I'm never sure, since I don't have the full professional setup to hear myself to make sure that the volume's actually good, but at least on my input capture the bar is moving to where it should be good. So if you can't hear me, just say so in the chat. If you can, then you can stay silent. That's cool. Alright, next up, oh yeah, and here's one of those other videos that I grabbed of Kaiju Wars. Now this game, in case you didn't catch the mention, is that this will have 5 levels on it. Not exactly when it launches, I believe that's the correct one. It'll definitely have these 2 levels, but the additional levels will be made available for free if they're not all there once this starts launching next year. And by the way, on this particular, when I was filming this was on Monday before the trade show had opened, so that's why you see things like forklifts going back and forth. But it was nice that I was able to jump on that without needing to wait or anything. Alright, any questions, comments, concerns about Roth Thrills and the new products that they have coming to arcades this next year before we move on? Guess not. Alrighty, let's move on to touch matches. Although, if you do want to pop up a question about Roth Thrills sometime afterwards, go right ahead. That's cool. I'll stop what I'm doing. Oh, at least as soon as I see your question. All right, next up is Touch Magics. So they've been advertising on the site for a little while too, and they are getting the premium space for their up here. And so all these products that you see on their banner ad were at the show and are available, I believe, now. I'll have to double check on Crazy Prize to see if that is actually shipping right now or not. But if not, it's coming pretty soon. I know the Pop-It game is shipping. But taking a stroll around their booth, in case you didn't see this video, I should skip the intro. So they had a nice new display. And then there's Crazy Prize. I saw some people calling this Skill Shot. It's because I guess that the words on that are a little more prevalent than Crazy Prize. But yeah, the technical name is Crazy Prize. And that's how you win it right there, is time your button press to shoot that there, to make that little solenoid fire off and hit the prize, and if it falls into the skill shot hole, you win the prize. There was also Pop-It, which is based on those little Pop-It things, those little Pop-It toys. But it works kind of like a crane machine, and you're trying to drop the balls into the holes, and depending on which color the ball falls through, it pops it on the screen, and so you want to get a full row popped to win tickets. You also had Space Warp 66, which is a game that I've had for a little while. Mega Blaster right next to that. Both of these were designed primarily as redemption games, and for Touch Magics, that's mostly what they do, is redemption sort of stuff. They are dabbling a little bit more into the prize side, as you saw with Crazy Prize, but also with Carnival Cup's Crane. But they also have things like the Magic's Pool, which over on the other side, when I was walking around these people, I guess I should have edited that part out, but on the TV right there that I barely looked at was a video showing their Magic's Pool, but they decided not to bring that and set it up at the show. But that would be an augmented reality or mixed reality projection mapping pool table, so interactive pool with video on the pool, the billiards surface, or snooker as they call it over in Europe, I believe. Then you had some other games, Carnival Cups, Drift and Thrift, Carnival Cups Crane, and I think that pretty much wraps up Touch Magics. But here are the games: Crazy Prize, Carnival Cups Crane, Drift and Thrift, Mega Blaster, Pop-It, and Space Warp 66. And it looks like I might need to go turn on some machines here. Maybe. Maybe not. Had somebody looking at my merchandisers. Merchandising. Alright. Next up is Wallop. And Wallop is a Chinese company that have been around, I think, since 1990, or at least the 90s. But they really burst onto the U.S. scene about 2011, 2012 with a game called Storm Racer, and I still get people watching that very early video of it. But I remember colleague Kevin Williams, shout out to him, and congrats on the new baby, Kevin. I remember him saying at the time that Storm Racer was the Chinese Space Invaders moment. Space Invaders is what put Japan on the map as far as video games went, and he felt that Storm Racer was the game that would put China on the map in terms of video games. And as you can see here, they're still around. Let me jump past all that to their latest racing game, Asphalt Moto Blitz DX. Now, in the United States and Europe, this game is being carried by Lei Games. As far as I'm aware, it's going to be available starting in January. But you can, anything that you saw at IAAPA, or most everything, I'd say 99% of things you saw at IAAPA, you could order now, and then it ships when it ships. But there might have been a few games that were still a little bit out on that. But we had this Marble Pusher Gear Fever, which might be carried by Amusement Source International. Hey, Paul. Let me go turn some games on. I'll pause this, or I'll let it go. Do its thing. What'd I miss? As I was saying, a lot of the games that you see at the Wallop booth are being carried by Amusement Source International, but they just had so many games that there was no way at the Amusement Source booth that they couldn't fit all this stuff there. They would have needed a booth that was 2-3 times that size, but the Thunderbolt shot that would have been on the video a moment ago is definitely being carried by ASI. I think this Alley-Oop Blitz is as well, which this isn't the only video basketball machine on the market, but if you're looking for options, if you're not interested in the one that Sega has, the All-Stars basketball, or Unis had one for a while, but I haven't seen them show it at their booth. So there's that. And then there was the prize popper. Let me move some stuff around here. Gotta pull some coins. Oops. I hate that about YouTube. And it has its own things that it suggests. There, let me count some coins really quick. But yeah, as you saw in the video there, we also have listed here the different games that are available through Wallop. And again, if there's something that isn't available through a company like Lei Games, then assume Amusement Source International 162. And then we had Gesture Art and Design. So I've covered these guys a few times in recent videos. And if you've wanted to see the development of an arcade game from an early alpha form into something that's closer to production, then those videos should capture that. And here's one of those closer to production models that they have. Now, of course, the software will change most likely. I mean, it's changed a lot just in the couple of months since I first saw it, or the few months. When I first saw it in September. And so this will probably start shipping around, I think they were saying, hoping to get it shipping in the beginning of the summer next year. And so who knows how much more it might change by then, but it is definitely playable and good to go. Just unfortunately for them, the main issue they had was because they were so far away from the arcade or the games in arcade pavilion that a lot of customers that might have been interested in this did not see it, as they were in the first time exhibitors pavilion, which is like on the northeastern side of the show, and there's not a lot of arcade machines over there. There's lots of different things for FECs, like they were pretty close to this I think it was a VR escape room, but they were also right across from an animatronics one, and right next to it some kind of DJ or karaoke thing. And so with all that combined, it made it a little hard to get noticed for customers who might be looking for an arcade redemption game like this one. And so I think they were saying they were also going to be adding a marquee on top of it too. The light wasn't working there for the Food Flight marquee itself at the show. But they did win the IAAPA brass ring for second place in the best new product category, which is really good considering, you know, their very first time coming along with a game and already getting second place. I think the first place was something from Unis, the Over the Edge machine. It's just, I'm a little surprised how that works, just because Over the Edge was at IAAPA 2022, and so I'm not sure how new it has to be. Obviously, if it's within the past year, it's still considered new enough to compete for that, but I'm not sure when the cutoff is on that. But yeah, we'll be keeping our eyes out on that, and I believe it's going to be testing here soon through a couple of different companies. Then we had VR360 Action, and they held a raffle for their $30,000 OMG Simulator, which you can see right here. Somebody was playing it as they were about to start. It's this machine over here, on the right. But I guess I can put the volume up for this one. Not sure if anybody can hear that. The first person they picked was not around at the show, or at least here, so you had to be there to win it. That's Malik of VR360 Action. And Raphael, he's their sales guy. I think the gentleman here is the CEO of the company. So yeah, the first one was not there. Rob Bueller, Ferris Bueller. I guess it is kind of amusing if you know the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he has to call out Bueller, Bueller. It's almost like that. And I guess Rob Bueller took a day off, and he missed out on a $30,000 machine. So the next runner-up was Gameland Laser Tag and Arcade in Red Deer, Canada. So these guys right here were there. They won that machine, so that was pretty cool. I'd never seen anything this high-end be given away at a raffle at IAAPA, and so that's quite the get. I wouldn't expect them to be giving one away every IAAPA, though. But definitely a good way to promote their brand and their equipment. So I wonder if that's already been installed by this point. It's been a month, so probably by now. But those are all the advertisers and sponsors for Arcade Heroes as we have them that were at IAAPA 2023, and those are the games that are available. With VR360 Action, I don't remember them announcing anything brand new that they've never had before, but I know that they have developers working on new content, and all their systems do handle multiple games. I think the OMG Simulator comes with something like 25 rides, and so I think they're working on additional ones to put into that. But yeah, let's move on to other arcade games and such. Let me check the chat here. No chats yet, so I'll just keep on trucking. Now, from here on out, we'll go alphabetical order. We have Ace Amusement, which is a Chinese company, and this at this show, really got to see how the value of Ace Amusement has really skyrocketed. As it used to be that you would see Ace Amusement show up here and there on a few games around different trade shows, but now it's at several, and so I would see their product they have them at Lei Games, at Coastal Amusements, at Amusement Source International, probably a couple of others, but this show they decided to do their own booth. Excuse me, sorry. And so there were a couple of games there. I should have grabbed video of their whole booth, which I did not. They did have a 4-player version of Galaxy Rangers. The 2-player version's carried by Coastal Amusements. But they had this new sort of Mario Kart-like game. Just need to work on those polygon depth errors when you're driving through the bridge. Maybe if the camera was a little different, I'm not sure what might be the best solution for that, or just make some better collision on the bridge. Of course, this is a game for kids, so usually they don't care too much about stuff like that. They might want to change how the question blocks look, since actually even the coins too. It's so close to Mario. It's like if I was a developer, or if I was consulting these guys, I would say change that so that you're not going to incur the wrath of Nintendo's lawyers. It's not worth it, especially on game that, it's like I don't know who you might buy this game from. Maybe you can order directly from Ace Amusement, or maybe some other company like Coastal or Amusement Source might carry it. It's just hard to say. Even the bananas look just like Mario Kart, so you don't exactly want to play with that sort of fire. But they also had a few other redemption games around, so if you're in a location that's looking for redemption and maybe something that's a little bit more affordable out there, they probably would have something that fits that bill. Next up is Adrenaline Amusements. Now, if you do go to this post and you prefer to just read it, you can click on these and it'll take you to a more detailed post about their equipment. So that's what that would do there. But with Adrenaline Amusements, they had a huge booth space. It was 2 booths separated by the main aisle, and they only had one brand new game. That would be Draken's Realm Keepers, which looked super impressive with 4 of them next to each other. And Draken's, at first I thought it was just another concept in light gun games, but then I realized that what they're really aiming for is having a ride, kind of like Virtual Rabbids or King Kong VR, but without any VR component to it. Or I guess you could say it's kind of like Typhoon. But yeah, again, without the VR stuff, but you have some guns so that it is interactive. And so I still don't care for the fact that it has no leaderboards. It has a scoring system, as you can kind of see right there. But the scoring only matters if it's 2 players, and it'll compare at the end of the level who's the best performer there. But there's no way to save your score, unfortunately. And there's the aisle I talk about, where you have to walk across that. And as that continues to walk around, let me put something in chat here. Just so that we have that. I just realized while I was getting ready and set up for this that I did not ever grab like a lot of footage from the 65-inch version of Rabbids Hollywood. So I guess I should have stopped and really filmed that one. And you had the deluxe version of NFS Heat Takedown. I don't recall seeing the standard version at their booth. Pretty sure it wasn't there, but I saw it at another distributor somewhere. But fantastic looking game. I'll pause it so it's not on the back of that guy's head. And available now. Both the standard and deluxe versions are available now. But again, Draken's was the main new game that we hadn't seen previously. And as far as I'm aware, that is available now. And so you can place your orders. But again, just keep in mind you might have to wait a little bit to get there. Next up is American Pinball. They had a small booth in the southwestern end of the show, right in the Games and Arcade Pavilion area. But only 3 pinball machines: Hot Wheels, Legends of Valhalla, and Galactic Tank Force. And so here's where I play Galactic Tank Force. Now, they did, right after IAAPA, announce the, I think it was called the Signature Edition, the one where it has tank treads on the sides, and it has the back box that can fold down and make it look like a retro future tank. And I did notice that this played a little differently than what I experienced at Amusement Expo. Couldn't really put my finger on what they had changed exactly, because the layout looks the same to me. But perhaps just the updated software was making certain aspects play a little better, like the magnet or the pop-up bumper there at the very bottom. And so, as I recall, one thing that could be a little bit of a pain is when you're hitting the targets for this tank in the center here, it can hit the pinball back a lot faster than you're expecting. And so with the pop bumper and such, maybe those little posts by the flippers also help as well. And so yeah, it's a little less harsh, you could say. Now, American Pinball does have some new stuff in the works. I haven't really read into the rumors and the talk about what that is going to be. Usually, I mean, sometimes rumors in the pinball industry are spot on. Sometimes they're way off, and, just like any rumors in any industry. But we've seen more accurate rumors about pinball than we've seen about video games, and so at least arcade video games, I should say. But, yeah, that is American Pinball. Perhaps at Amusement Expo they'll have their next game announced. One thing that I should also throw out is American is looking to compete on price and looking to be a great alternative on the price wars, just because, your standard Jersey Jack and Stern pinball machines are just getting way up there in price, and so that's where they're looking to compete. Well, Arcade Fella, don't fret. Even though Godzilla has gone where it's a light gun game essentially, but it is VR. There are some games that we'll talk about here in just a minute that are light gun games and have nothing to do with VR. In fact, there's a trend going on right now of a certain type of game that. Again, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, so don't despair. There are still some traditional light gun games out there, but yes, they have definitely changed. Next up is Amusement Source International, and so these guys are headed up by Corey Haynes, who used to be the CEO of Gameworks, and doing a walk around their booth. I am impressed at how many games they were able to cram into their booth. If you look at the list down here, it's like, how did they fit all that into the relatively tiny space? But they did. And even though they had some games that were huge, like the Sniper Strike 2, which they've had before, these guys are very focused on redemption. I mean, there's a mix of redemption and video games, videmption things. As far as I'm aware, all of the videmption games will work as standard video games, so you can turn off the ticket stuff, the ticket side of it. Although I don't recall seeing anything mentioned about tickets on this one, the Go Hero of Robots. I mean, maybe it was there and I just wasn't paying attention, but I didn't see it mentioning tickets on the screen. I didn't take a good look, though, to see if it had a ticket dispenser on it, but that's an early Kinect powered game. You had this one called Racing Car NOS, which is there's no better word for it. It's a ripoff of the Hot Wheels King of the Road game that Adrenaline has, but it is different software. It doesn't use Hot Wheels cars themselves, and it has the sit-down portion there with the steering wheels, and it also has a gas pedal. Here's Skyriders Deluxe. I wish I would have captured more footage of this one. I did capture the non-deluxe version, the standard version, which does exist in many Chuck E. Cheese's, though they picked up the standard versions. And so if you want to find this prop cycle-like game out there, then go to a Chuck E. Cheese. But the deluxe version, which is available for others to grab, is also now available. And one thing that you might not have noticed if you were just looking at the game itself or looking at the pedals is really nice touch are the moving gears on the top of the marquee. I like animated stuff like that. But for kids, they might need the standard version as opposed to this one, because it is a little bit of a challenge for them to reach. Have some normal redemption games here. We'll skip over to Parkour Motor 2, which is basically like Superbikes, but better graphics. It's actually pretty decent graphics there. I mean, sure, maybe not super above mobile game, but still fine. I mean, for the most part, frame rate was solid. We also had Zombie Crisis, which reuses, as people mentioned on that video, reused some Unity assets, I think it was, to make a House of the Dead style game for it, but with zombies, of course, and its own unique thing, and a blue screen of death. I hadn't noticed that before. That's a nice little touch. The guns almost remind me of Namco's old Raising Storm as well. Here's a redemption game, Junkyard Rumble, which is a lot like the Mega Blaster that I mentioned earlier. But the drawback to Mega Blaster is has only one. It's only single player. This one has integrated 2-player. Then we have more ticket redemption games, which I don't know if anybody in chat or anybody watching right now is really interested in redemption. Among the redemption games I saw at the show, this Fantastic Train was pretty cool. Seems a little big for what the game itself does, but hey, it grabs attention, and that's kind of what you want at times. Although, as we'll get into here in a few minutes on Baytech, there seems to me that there needs to be some pulling back on how tall they make these machines, because it's getting a little too ridiculous. Yeah, so the rest of these are redemption games. So we'll move on unless somebody doesn't want me to or wants me to come back to it. But yeah, again, that's a very impressive list. And also, as mentioned, a bunch of games from Wallop that were not at their booth, at the ASI booth, are available through them to get if you're looking for that. And here's one that I've already apologized about on the blogs, where with Andamiro USA, I really thought that I had filmed the booth. But when I was on the plane flying back and looking through all my files, it's like, oh crap, I knew I missed something. And I actually missed more than one thing this time, and unfortunately Andamiro's booth walk around was one of them. And so, yeah, darn it. But they still had a nice booth setup. They had the latest version of Pump It Up 2023 Phoenix available. I wasn't aware beforehand, but apparently people wanted me to film the beginner version, or the casual mode. I forget the exact name of the one for kids. It's kind of hard. I guess I should have just asked one of the guys to show it off, because granted, when I was filming this, it was during the middle of a tournament, so I couldn't do that. Yeah, wouldn't want to stop them in the middle of a tournament to capture something like that. But let's jump ahead here. And so this was also during the tournament. And so, I mean, one thing that I do like about Pump It Up compared to like DDR or Step Maniacs is just the placement of the foot pads is a lot nicer to me. It feels more natural to me than the cardinal directions. But I'm not much of a rhythm gamer. I stink at a lot of that stuff, and so at least with the foot controlled ones, and so I don't know what I'm talking about, I guess. Or I'm sure somebody would complain to hear me mention that, but I like Pump It Up setup. It works better for somebody like myself. And I didn't notice I had some camera shake there. Let me count some coins here. So other things that Andamiro had at their booth, aside from Pump It Up, was Bobblehead Baseball Versus, which I liked that one. It's also nice to have a baseball video game back in arcades, and it works for just regular fun play, no tickets. But if you do want to run it as a ticket game, it'll work either way. Which is always nice. I wish just all the redemption games made that obvious from the get-go, but non-ticket mode or not, but that's not always the case. Let's see, we got Crazy Toy Crane, Guardians of the Galaxy Ticket Coaster, Pump It Up as mentioned, Spider-Man Coin Pusher, SpongeBob VR Bubble Coaster, Superstar 2, which is a merchandiser, and then Tic Shack Toe, which debuted at Amusement Expo earlier this year. And so that's Andamiro. Got any questions about them or any of the others I've talked about so far? And thank you, Arcade Fella, for the kind words. Appreciate that. I do what I can. I do have to say, though, it's been a lot of video editing the past month. It's driven me a little bit crazy as I've had a lot of stuff on my plate on top of all this stuff, but I want to get the information out there. And it's a lot of work. Alright, let's move on to Bandai Namco Amusements. Now, there's no other way to say it. This was a little bit of a disappointment, for at least if you're into video games. If you're into redemption stuff and things like air hockey, then they were fine. But if you are looking for just straight up pure video game goodness like Dead Heat Unleashed, it's like, well, we'd already seen that one. It came out earlier this year. It's out in arcades somewhere. In a way, this is like Maximum Tune 7, just casual Maximum Tune. But I have lots of videos of that already on my channel, so that's why I didn't really dwell on it for the booth walk around or do extra videos. This was one of the new games. This is to switch out, this will be available as a kit as well as a dedicated form to switch out the Red Zone Rush. It's just got Looney Tunes added to it, and lots of Looney Tunes stuff popping up, such as the Looney Tunes Pinball, as I talked about on a video the other day. Mallet Mayhem, which is a Batman, more Joker and Harley Quinn themed whack-a-mole for 4 players. Tata Islands, which and I mentioned, I think it was a comment on this particular video. Somebody's like, well, why are they changing the name? If English is not your first language, Tata is English slang for boobs, and so Namco doesn't necessarily want to have an issue like they had way back in the day with Puckman and what people might have done with that, and so that's why they're going to change it. So that explains why, but I don't know what the name is going to be when they've got that. Another cartoon-themed game is the Tom and Jerry Kitchen Chaos, which basically works like the Pac-Man air hockey table, whose name I'm forgetting at the second. Let me count some more coins. Maybe somebody watching can remember what that Pac-Man air hockey was called. By the way, I had to do a $2 refund on XP. Sorry? Yeah. They claimed that it just did its own thing by itself. And makes sense. Even though they had already put in like 20, 30 bucks. But $6.18. I cannot remember the name of that Pac-Man air hockey table. The one that had the mini pucks coming out of it. There's so many Pac-Man games with something after the Pac-Man title that I get it all mixed up in my head at this point. I'm sure somebody at Namco does too. There's just so many of them. As mentioned before, if anybody sees a Bandai Namco Amusements booth at IAAPA and wonders why on earth are there products from other non-Namco companies here like Roth Thrills and Adrenaline and Andamiro, it's just because of Bandai Namco Amusements Europe serves as a distributor for these particular products in Europe. Like they're the official Roth Thrills distributor across Europe and I think the Middle East. And so that's, since IAAPA is an international trade show, that's why they have these games there. Oh, and that's where the standard version of NFS Heat Takedown was at the Namco booth. It's like, I know I saw it somewhere, I just couldn't remember where. Monday morning, maybe I shouldn't be doing these sorts of live streams Monday morning so that I'm a little sharper. The newest version of Big Buck Hunter Reloaded, which as soon as I get my kit, then I'll probably just do some direct capture video of this instead of show footage, off-screen camera footage. Namco themselves also does sell merchandise stuff for cranes, plushies, that sort of stuff. They also have a home division, the Pac-Man Cave division, which sells stuff to home. So if you want to get official Pac-Man merchandise for your man cave, then you can contact Bandai Namco Amusements America, and they have a few things. Their website has that stuff too. But all this stuff we've seen before and played, but you know, they had a lot there and available. Let's move on to Baytech. It used to be called Baytech Games, now Baytech Entertainment. They bought Skee-Ball out a few years ago, and so that's why you see Skee-Ball at their booths. We have Toilet Bowl Toss, which is their new redemption game that they're pushing, where you throw the poop into the toilets. But don't worry, it's not real poop, but it is colored brown. The balls are. Yeah, and at least they don't smell like it too, because nobody would play this one, or maybe. We have this one was a surprise. The company that makes this SpongeBob VR game, I think, is called Mega Motion. Somebody can correct me on that. They don't put their logo really in any prominent place, but Baytech had it. In previous years, I think the past 2 years, it's been shown at the Creative Works booth, but something changed, and so now I guess it's being carried by Baytech, as that might be the first thing that Baytech's tried with VR, as I can recall. Here's those super tall games that I mentioned, the Hot Shot, Free Throw Fury, and Tundra Toss. These games are absolutely enormous, and so if you have the location that can house them, great, but it's just like, man, the games need to stop growing taller and taller. It's just crazy how tall some of these things get, as it becomes a nightmare. I don't know exactly how tall those things are, but almost seems like 20 feet. And even this redemption game here, I mean, I guess it grabs attention, there's no doubt about that, but it's just like some locations just don't have the ceiling height. I mean, here where I'm at has 14-foot ceilings, I think it is, and I might not be able to fit something like this in there if I really wanted to put it in there. But Goats and Ropes, for what I got a message right as IAAPA started that this was showing up at some Round 1 USA locations right as the show started, and so if you want to check that one out, you can probably find it at one of those. Just, I don't know when it might actually launch and hit the streets if it passes testing. But other than that, everything else at the Baytech booth is stuff we've seen already. Although what I was showing on the screen here was a new kit upgrade for Big Bass Will to make it look more modern. It's funny just what adding LEDs can change about a game, even though this game is feels centuries old at this point, but it's only been around for 15 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's obviously a staple of many arcades out there. Alright, next up is Chicago Gaming Company, where they had Cactus Canyon at their booth, but the main thing that I wanted to get a try was Pulp Fiction. And yeah, I mean, Toilet Bowl Toss has been showing up at some different location tests. I want to say that it's been on location test at some Dave & Buster's. I just can't remember for certain where it's been appearing at, but I think that one might be available already, and so that's where you should be able to start finding it with at a wider variety of locations. But Pulp Fiction Pinball, so this was shown off at Amusement Expo earlier this year, and I didn't get a chance to play it because every time I went over to the booth it was being hogged, and they only had 2 of them, and so it was hard to get on them, and I had a limited amount of time since I was busy filming things, and so I just didn't get a chance to play it. But at IAAPA they had a lot more there, and so I finally got a chance to play it, and it's fun. What's interesting is where it doesn't have a lot of things that you normally have in pinball, like lots of ramps and such. It feels a little easier to play, and due to that, I think it could work with players that maybe aren't super into pinball. So yeah, I mean, it feels like a pinball machine from the 80s, but it also has all these really nice 3D sculpted, I guess maybe vinyl figures in there, as you can see, from John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson's characters in that movie. But overall, fun game designed by Mark Ritchie, and again by Play Mechanics for Chicago Gaming Company. And this one is finally shipping. And so I've seen that a few of these have shown up on locations out there, so I guess I would call this a November release. And so that's one of those things I'm going to be working on this week sometime, is a short video that talks about all the releases for November. And so, yeah, cool game. Next up is Coastal Amusements, which these guys focus a lot on redemption, videmption, sorts of games. I mean, I believe all of their redemption games can be set to non-ticket mode, but I'd have to double check with Paul over at Coastal on that. Here was one of the new games that they debuted, which was called Wild Things. Oh yeah, as that mentioned on the video there, I checked with Coastal and they said that most everything would be available. There were some machines that were a little bit delayed, just on a boat and whatnot, but they would have restock arriving in January. Surf League, this is one that really impressed me. A surfing game, but for kids, but just the cabinet look as well as the graphics on the game were surprisingly good. But there are going to be some changes to it here soon, and so the final version will probably be a little bit different than what I've shown in these videos. But other than that, the other games that you'd see in this video, as well as my other Coastal videos, should be production final ones, such as Bullseye Crackshot. And so for you arcade fella, as you were mentioning earlier about light gun games, and so here's a non-VR light gun game. But there's a real trend that was very apparent at IAAPA, and that's these shooting gallery style games where it's testing your speed, it's testing your accuracy, and basically just testing your general shooting skill on games. And so Bullseye Crackshot's not the only one that we'll be talking about, but I will be trying to do a video this week. I'm just waiting on some information where I'm going to do a comparison between the different games that were at the show, so you can get a good solid idea of what the differences are between them all. Now, if you don't want water gun games like the Dinosaur Era or the Wild Things, then they also have those 3-player options that you just saw in the video of both games. And so I think the statement was shipping sometime this month. And then the rest of their stuff were crane machines. But yeah, any questions about Coastal or any of the other things that I've talked about up to this point in the chat before we move on to Elot, which I should have put a line there. So I'll be updating this post after I finish this live stream. Okay, let's keep going. Elot USA, which is a kind of, you could say maybe a conglomerate of different companies. So Benchmark Games International, Coast to Coast Entertainment, Elot themselves all have products through these guys. And a surprising one is that Benchmark, which is generally known for their very popular redemption games, particularly their ball drop games, introduced a couple of boxing machines at the show. And that was another trend that I picked up on while I was at IAAPA, was how just boxing machines are becoming a real big thing out there, and they're earning really, really well, and they don't cost a lot of money. And maybe that's one reason why a lot of operators are trending towards grabbing boxers, is just because they don't cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 like a lot of the video games are costing at this point. And so yeah, you probably might start seeing a lot more boxing machines show up out there. But they also had a cool curved air hockey table called Funky Beats Hockey. Now maybe the volume was so low when I came across it, but I don't recall hearing any funky beats out of it. But the light show that it was producing almost seemed like it was trying to go in that direction. Yeah, they also had a new Superman game, which I'm trying to remember how it played. I think it was kind of a pachinko-ish ball drop sort of thing, kind of like the old Fishbowl Frenzy. VRX Arcade, which I've mentioned. Let's hop on over there. So they've been showing this one for a long time, but it just kept not popping up for sale. But as far as I'm aware, this one finally is available now. And so this was designed by a company called Box Blaster VR. They used to have their own booths at the show, but this time they did not. And so I don't know if this is all that they're focusing on right now. But they did change it too. Like this cabinet used to have this overhead portion that the VR headset would fall down from, but then they changed it to where it's on the control panel there. But this has been changed from what we saw last year. But as far as I'm aware, again, this is the production version of the game, and it comes with this Golden Mace VR game where you have all these warriors being thrown at your fortress, and you have to defend your fortress by grabbing them, stabbing them, throwing them back. It's a little bit of an oddball, but it is fun. So I'm not sure if this will have additional software released for it. I also don't know what the price is, so I'll have to ask a distributor to find that out, but that is available now. Next up is Exa Arcadia, and they had a nice booth at the last IAAPA, but this time they did not have one, which they said was due to some issues in the show, not the scheduling, but just the floor layout, and so they were almost put outside, although I noticed that except for some outdoor distributor or outdoor focused companies, there wasn't anybody else outside.
It'll be 92 today. There's a bunch of tokens in the SQ.
Yeah, no problem.
It's better this week, but
yeah. Actually, this weekend was pretty solid, and so in that regard, it definitely picked up.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like it right now, just because of how slow things are, but yeah. I'll get your Street Fighter on in just a moment. Oh, you can keep it if you like.
They can't even put it back in the machine, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, I know. I'm sure if Adam could put them back in there, he'd put them back in there.
Probably, yeah, just because we have so many lying around that.
Yeah.
Makes it kind of tough. It's 92.
All right. Be back in a minute. I gotta fill up the knobby ball, so.
Okay. No problem. Gotta go turn some games on. I'll be right back so you can enjoy watching Omen of Sorrow there. Guess I'll turn on the sound unless my thing's crashing. Okay, so that was Omen of Sorrow, but yeah, Ex Arcadia, they were at the AVS Company's booth with a single cabinet instead, and they showed me a few games, which I posted videos of on my channel here. So we got Jisoo Squad, which we've seen before, Omen of Sorrow, Rising Chaos, which you just watched, Phantom Breaker Omnia, which is a more anime-style fighter, I think with 3D background, so I guess more in the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 vein. Toho Scarlet Diabolique Fantastica, scrolling shoot 'em up. And so, yeah, these games are all coming in 2024. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I need to put on there Arcana Heart 3 Extend. So that'd be another one. So lots of fighting games coming back to arcades via Ex Arcadia, and at pretty reasonable prices, and games that generally have some content changes compared to the console ports that they are based on, which, as I've said before, I always appreciate that. As just ran news about Street Fighter 6 Type Arcade over the weekend, and at first I thought I read something about there being extra content, but it turns out no, there's absolutely no difference between the arcade and console versions other than input lag differences. But I mean, I know for the fighting game community, they really get into input lag stuff, and X Arcadia is really great about that. But to me, it doesn't make such a massive difference that it's like if one is slightly better, slightly worse than the other, that that I'm going to say, well, wow, that's a completely different game. It's like, no, I want, as an arcade operator, I need something that really draws people into the arcade, which means extra characters, extra stages, things like that, as opposed to just input lag differences. And so I have zero interest in wasting money on Street Fighter 6 just because nobody's going to come and play it. And I've seen that already with Street Fighter 4. I wasted thousands of dollars on buying a kit that did well at first, but as soon as they could get it at home, most of the guys never came back. And so, like, why should I, as an arcade operator, get screwed over just so Capcom has a marketing prop? That just rubs me the wrong way. And so, shame on them for that, but I know everybody else out there will probably say I'm stupid or whatever. So ICE didn't have anything else new. In fact, they had a slightly less impressive booth than the year prior. I don't really know what's going on there, but I do know they have some new stuff in development. I guess it just wasn't ready for the show. IGPM Calcamat had their evolution of the Hit the Green. So now instead of Hit the Green, it's MMA Boxer, which this guy was not quite as into it as the other guy you saw there just a moment ago. The LED screen on it is really nice, particularly in that it's showing all these guys punching the whole time. But it's punching and kicking. Cool little idea. And, speaking of boxers and such. Jersey Jack Pinball. I spoke very briefly with Jack himself. He was at the show. Got to play Elton John, which is a very nice looking machine. Also got to play Godfather for the first time, which I also enjoyed. And they had Toy Story and Guns N' Roses, sorry. But there was a few different toppers that they had for Godfather. So there's that one. There's a different one on the other side. But all some impressive stuff that they had going on. And their games do look fantastic. It's just, like I've said with Pinball ad nauseum, that most of these games are too expensive for me to put on location anymore. But what's your favorite pinball machine that's come out in recent times? And it could even be Labyrinth, which was not at the show. But it was nice to see Jersey Jack. They don't come to every amusement event anymore, like they weren't at Amusement Expo earlier this year. But was good to see them there and representing. They were right next to Lei Games. Didn't hear anything about what their next game might be. Getting back on the subject of light gun games was Jet, and so this is a surprising one. These guys used to just be focused on redemption games, and so I didn't really pay them a lot of attention at all. But in the past few years, they've really started to pivot towards having games like this one, Quick Shot, and as we'll see in a moment, the Big Shot. I mean, they still do kiddie games. They still have some redemption games. They have these air hockey tables now. But yeah, at the show, they had 3 different light gun games. Now, granted, they were all similar, like Big Shot and Quick Shot are the same game, just different cabinet. Although the one that we'll see here in a second is very different as far as the software goes. It's not the same software, and that is Mega Shot, which came with this really cool gun. I would say this was the light gun game of the show for me. Instead of having, I think it's 6 scenarios, this one only has 3, but in many ways it feels like Silent Scope. And it uses a real scope on it. It's not like Silent Scope had an LCD in it that to mimic a scope in there, but that one has a real scope that you use. But there is a virtual scope you can activate with a button on the side, and so that one's really cool. Just probably a little bit pricey, so I'm not sure how many places out there might grab it. But if you can't afford the Mega Shot, perhaps the Big Shot or the Quick Shot would be up your alley. And then they also had Quick Toss and the Shooting Madness over here on the side. But yeah, impressive stuff from Jet Games, so look forward to seeing what else they might bring to the video side in the future. And I guess I did need to add the Shooting Madness video basketball machines to that list there. Heading back north on the show, we had Lei Games, which have their distinctive big brick wall, a faux brick wall. But here was a game that they introduced, which was designed by Amusements, and now being carried by Lei here, called Airstrike, where it has this pendulum swinging motion seat, and the gameplay itself almost seems a little bit like Prop Cycle, but it is a shoot 'em up. You'd have no control over how fast or slow that your craft goes, which does feel a little weird. Be nice if that could be changed, but otherwise it was a fun little game that also ships in pairs, just like Asphalt Moto Blitz ships in pairs, and talked about that earlier with the Wallop booth. And so let's skip ahead. We had Asphalt 9 Legends VR, or Arcade VR, which has one game mode extra that the non-VR versions do not have. And this game has been changed a bit from the console or mobile versions, and it definitely does not look like a mobile game, although I'm sure somebody out there will say it looks like garbage, just because there's always somebody who says that about everything in the arcade business, and they always compare everything to mobile games, even though it's not accurate. But this is one of the best looking games on the arcade market these days. There's the Ultra HD version of Virtual Rabbids, and they also had their sports games like Slam and Jam Ultra, Hyper Pitch, Hyper Shoot, which I think I forgot to put on the list there. Cosmic Spire, which is Angry Birds Coin Crash, FGTV At a Time. Cosmic Spire is a new coin pusher game which exists in with a different name in parts of Asia. But this one has this distinctive tower that you're trying to get the balls into different levels and play. Let's see, over to the left was Dragon's Bane, which was a coin pusher. Oh yeah, Rick and Morty. Yeah, I gotta really go back and update this list. But Dragon's Bane is a new coin pusher with a video element attached to it, and you're trying to get the coins, which you control, shooting into the moving target there. And so if you can time it just right, then that does things on the video end of the game. But that is Lei Games. Any questions, comments about that one? Or any of the other ones I've talked about so far? And, as mentioned on this site here, the Airstrike, Asphalt Moto Blitz, Cosmic Spire, and Dragon's Bane are all launching in January. But everything else at their booth, it should be available from Lei. So that means you'll find it in arcades already, or perhaps in arcade if they don't have one, they might get one soon. If there is any of these games that your local arcade doesn't have, you can always go and tell them. It's like, hey, have you guys thought about getting so-and-so game, or such and such game? And if they hear that enough from different people, then they might consider it. But follow up with it. I hate it when I get people that come in and say, hey, I wish you had this game, and then perhaps I do get it, and then I never see that person again. But I don't base my purchasing decisions on one thing that somebody says. I only pay attention to, like, if I'm getting a lot of people every month coming through and saying, hey, where's this game? I wish you guys had that, then I would give that a lot more stock. All right, Playmind is a game out of Canada which jumped onto the scene, I think it was 2021, with their ball toss game called the Playbox, which has multiple games on it that you can play. And here's the newest version of that, where at first they released an even bigger version, but they've made some adjustments as they've been operating these out on location. In fact, they have their own location now, a Playmind location. And so by taking some feedback in, they've improved it so that it's a better game. And part of that improvement includes a net on the top. Like previously it was just open, and so balls would go flying off over it all the time, which at trade shows has always bugged their neighbors. But they had a new play box which is coming out in this next spring, and so this is much more arcade style and definitely work on the price as far as where the larger play box is at is not attractive to smaller locations like mine, but also on the space. But then there is this one which works on both space and on price. Sure, no problem. But I can't remember if they were saying like 15 or 16,000 on this one. Yeah, it saves a ton of space and provides you a very similar experience. Now, one thing that they did say is that the software is changed from the bigger version, and that's because, well, for one, you got to change just the size of the screen, but it just changes certain elements of how it works. And so I mean, it is cool though, like this dinosaur game. Like, I could see PlayMind, if they ever wanted to, start making their own light gun games. Thanks, Paul. We'll see ya. Because like that zombie game, and they have this other game where you're in this kind of futuristic like ancient retro future sort of thing. I don't know if that's a thing, but it's just like or almost maybe like Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, or Zelda Breath of the Wild, where it's like you're in this ancient setting, but there's like this futuristic technology going on, but they have a game on their larger play box where it would work as a light gun game, and it would look fantastic too. It was one of the best looking games. And so I know they have some people working for them that have worked for some big names in the console space. I think that used to work for Ubisoft, and so part of that would be some of their artists, and so they're able to develop some games that look really, really nice. Really big crane company, I didn't notice anything new for them. Retro Arcade LLC, they also didn't have anything like explosively new. They did have a new version of this Atari cocktail cabinet, which we first saw last year, and so this one looks a lot more like the classic Atari Warlords cocktail design, particularly on the bottom part. Now, if you've never come across an Atari Warlords cocktail cabinet, I used to own one for many, many years. It did not have the top excuse me, I'm sorry. The top surface was not at all like this. It did have a glass, but it was just a different shape. It didn't go over the control panel in any way. But this can be adjusted up and down. But the most intriguing thing to me about this isn't so much that you'll get Atari Warlords, which is a fantastic classic arcade game. Like, it's one of the best multiplayer games from the 80s. It's just they are bringing a new 4-player version of Food Fight, Atari's Food Fight, that's going to be available on these new ones, and so I'm looking forward to that. And but don't know much more about it than that at the moment. But the main thing that this company sells are the ice cold beer cabinets. These are licensed, very faithful remakes of the classic ice cold beer electromechanical game where you're controlling this rod and trying to get the steel pinball up the way to fall into the holes that have the lit up target hole. But they'll also have Zeke's Peak available, and they're probably going to be doing some other ones here soon. So a nice affordable option on both fronts from them. Here's another one that I regret missing. S&B Toy and St. Louis Game Company did have a couple of video games there. I assume Videmption. One was called Amazing Race. The other one was Street Racing. Street Racing was definitely for kids because it was a small, tiny cabinet. But Amazing Race was one where you actually had to run in place to move your character in the game. I kept seeing it, and I kept like, oh, I gotta go film them. But by the time I had to leave, I was like, oh crap, I didn't get a chance. So my apologies to them on that. Next chance I get, I will go there or film them. Next up is one that maybe some of you have been waiting for if you're fans of Sega, and that would be Sega Amusements. But one thing, as we've been talking about on the Arcade Heroes Discord, is that Sega Amusements is actually owned by and operated by a company called Kaizen Entertainment. And I noticed that you'll see in this video, such as right over here, you can kind of see it. They had banners saying Kaizen Entertainment, so it almost seems like they're starting to push that name a little bit more. And whether or not they would change from Sega at some point, they might, because they're technically licensing the Sega name for use. I don't know how expensive that is. Obviously, the Sega name carries with it a lot of goodwill and a lot of expectations, but I mean, I'll assume for now that for the long future that they'll still be Sega Amusements. But we saw Apex Rebels there, which from what I played of it, I played through all the different levels. It was a lot of fun. I love the graphics. It does have some work on it still. They said that the build at the show was something like 70% complete. And so one of the things that they're working on is the handling. And so I would say, don't base your final judgments on a game off of what you see on a video online. Actually go and play it, and then maybe if it fits what you decided on, great, fine. But it might not. It might surprise you. But I had a lot of fun with Apex Rebels. Sega does have a lot of these redemption and redemption games, prize merchandisers, like you just saw, which there are a lot of arcades out there that rely on these things to make their money and to pay their bills. Of course, if you do want to see arcades thrive on the video side, then go out and find an arcade and play the video games. The more that the video games get played, the more money that they make, then the more that locations like mine and others will invest in those things, because us arcade operators invest in what makes money. We can't afford to have stuff that's losing us money. And so if you come into an arcade that's full of redemption, well, you know what's making the money. It's the redemption stuff. And speaking of redemption, or kind of videmption, is Zombies Ready Daddy Go, which was a very fun derby-style game. Now, derby games have existed for a very long time, before Ticket Redemption, I believe. But the goal is to roll the ball into the target holes, and if you get it into one of the holes in the back, that makes your zombie, in this case, run farther or faster. And in the past, these have been based on like horses, like mechanical horses or camels even, and uses the same principles. But this one, instead of having mechanical zombies, it has the video screen to help it be a little more versatile. Here's some of the other redemption products. These ones here, Polar Slide, I think it's called, and the ones behind it called Sink Pong, were designed by a Korean company called Komuse. I'll add a liquid there. You have a Wallop game, the Storm Rider 2, which was released earlier this year, was at the last IAAPA, and ships in a twin configuration, as does VR Agent, which was designed by 3 Mindwave, the same developers as the Apex Rebels. Sorry, my mind went blank for a minute. There's the Kaizen logo. This was the first show where I saw this Kaizen logo be so prevalent. Here's Power Roll, which has been out for ages, a redemption game that's done very well on location. I've seen earnings for this one before. Men in Black, the Sega just announced that they have a non-ticket version of this available. And so if you want to just get that and have it play as a regular arcade game, it's now available to do so. You also had Drone Racing Genesis, what I would assume the latest software for that. I didn't get a chance to play it to see if anything had changed as far as the handling went, but it's another nice looking game. And then you had Hypercross, which is like super bikes with snowmobiles, or Arctic Thunder if you prefer. And lots of cool LEDs and animations on that one there. But that pretty much is Sega's booth. Any comments on that one or questions? Alright, so let's move on to one of the big things being talked about at the show is this JJ Bot, the Avatar, which uses a robotic arm with a screen attached to it to interact with the player. And as I've said, I think this could be a big game changer for cranes. Now, I don't foresee cranes out there, possibly in part because of a patent that I assume that Smart has on this. all cranes switching over to robot arms. But I could see all these cranes that have video displays inside of them using a camera and interacting with the player. It's like we've seen a lot of cranes out there that have screens, but they just don't interact with the player really. They don't often add much to the experience, other than just adding flash and adding extra cost. But you know, where this has the robot really interacting with you, talking to you, the final production version will have a camera in JJ's head, and then they'll also use AI to be able to distinguish things that it sees in the environment. Like it could probably make a comment on like, that's a nice blue shirt that you have on, and things, at least from what they told me, is what it's going to have. It's just, to me, the non-starter on this one, as cool as this is and interactive, is that this is a $50,000 crane machine. And, you know, it's got to be posting amazing earnings on location test to justify that sort of price tag, because that is huge. But is it cool? Definitely. There's no doubt about that. Anything new from SNK? No. So SNK, yeah, I mean, they exist, of course, but they're just more focused on the console space. Now, there is one SNK game available, a new one in arcades for that XR Arcadia that I mentioned earlier, called Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect. And that version is slightly different from the console version. One of the things it has all the overkills restored. It has blood. It has a full English translation. It lets you choose your button layout, so it is the superior version. So like if you got the Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect as a part of the Samurai Showdown collection from a few years ago, the arcade version is superior in that regard. Also, I believe the input lag was improved. Excuse me, sorry. So that would be the only new thing from SNK, but that's been out there for a little while already. I think it came out earlier this year. There is another SNK, a game that was on the Neo Geo MVS that is in development for the XR Arcadia. It hasn't been announced yet. I did get to play it earlier this year, but because it hasn't been announced yet, I can't say what it is. But another fighting game that some people might know from the Neo Geo MVS will be hitting arcades in 2024. But that's the closest that we know of right now. It'd be great if there was a new Metal Slug or King of Fighters that wasn't just stuck in Japan, but actually available here. And that's the great thing about the X Arcadia system that I talk about all the time, is it does allow a lot of games that normally are stuck to Japan to be available in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere. Good question. For shmups, there was only the Toho, the second Toho game, and so that the first one was already released on X Arcadia, I think at the end of last year is what it was. But if you're interested in that, I have a video on my channel here showing that one in action. But just keep in mind, this one was, I think they said 75% complete, so they're going to be adding some gadgets to the sides here where the black bars were in what I was filming, and so it will look much nicer than this when it's in horizontal mode. However, the X Arcadia does allow you to set the screen in Tate mode, and so that you can play that properly. But I guess another shmup I could think of would be the Airstrike that Lei Games has, but it's not exactly a shmup in the sense of like a scrolling shooter, a vertical or a horizontal one. But there really wasn't much in the at the show in terms of that. That was more last year. Step Revolution had the latest versions of Step Maniacs, but I've seen that already, so I won't dwell on it. I guess I'm a little bit behind here on the time. I don't want to take too long. Stern's booth, they had their new Venom pinball machine, which I got to play a little bit, but I needed to spend more time on it to get a better feel for it. Other than that, the rest of the games we've seen before, I have some of them, like the Jurassic Park that is showing on the camera, I have sitting over here. And on the other side, they have Guardians of the Galaxy, which I also have. And so it's rare, if not unheard of, that Stern ever unveils a brand new pinball machine for this show. In fact, nobody really does that. They always like to unveil new things for the Pinball Expo, which happens in October. Now, personally, I do wish that IAAPA happened in October instead. That would be much nicer. But yeah, so Stern had those games at their booth, and they have the latest version of their Insider Connected, which is always good way to help draw players into locations. Just so far, I haven't seen it really bring people into my location. Granted, I only have 2 games that use it at the moment, so I probably need more for there to be a better, stronger effect in that regard. But I do like the direction that things are headed with pinball. With that, I just need the price to come down on those machines. Team Play didn't have anything new. Trio Tech had a huge space. They were right behind Adrenaline Amusements, and they mimicked the same kind of space layout, but they had their XD Dark Ride, their Cube. The Cube is a light gun game, which I have a video of that on my channel, so you can look that up when you'd like. But instead of just having the, and then, yeah, here's footage of when it was debuted last year. I mean, this is a very high-end light gun shooter. I had to scoff at somebody's comments saying that it looked like old graphics. You don't know what you're talking about, dude. Those are not old graphics. But I'm not sure if they're watching this or not. But they introduced the Super Blaster, which is just like the Cube, but instead of being in an enclosed cabinet that's more arcade-like, it had this open back, and so it seemed to give it a little bit more breathing space. It seemed like the seats were larger, but yeah, you have 5 different light gun games to choose from. Again, the graphics on these are very high quality. The Super Blaster and the Cube are essentially Trio Tech's XD Dark Ride, which, if you've seen that before, or if you haven't seen it before, I should say, it's this giant structure that has D-box motion seats, and it's from 4 to 8 players, or even higher, where you play this massive multiplayer light gun game, shoot stuff at the screen. It tracks what targets you've hit. It has leaderboards, which is nice, but it's the XD Dark Ride is very expensive. They start at somewhere around $250,000. And so the Cube and the Super Blaster are to provide a similar experience, but in a much smaller package that can work in more arcades. Granted, it's still pricey. The Cube, I heard the quote for $100,000. At the show, somebody told me that the Super Blaster would be more affordable than that, which is a little surprising. But I didn't get a quote exactly on how much that would cost. But still a bit on the high end, but you might come across an FEC out there that will have either the Cube or the Super Blaster available to play. And again, offers multiple games. Unico USA, I feel so bad that I missed these guys. It just totally, I spaced it out, so I have to admit my own fault there. But yeah, they had their Nova Blast City desktop arcade machine made for home use, not for commercial use, at the show, and they debuted it there, so I'm really sorry that I missed that. But they also sell the 4x3 LCDs, which I have a video of installing, and I'm actually going to be ordering a second one here soon, because I have a few different CRTs which have just died on me, and I'm sorry to the classic collectors and the purists out there, but I'm done. It's just nobody wants to fix these CRTs anymore, or very few want to. It's like there's one guy I know on YouTube who does fix them, but he's so swamped with orders that he can't get around to it. And so, yeah, it sucks, but that's just reality as far as technology goes. For Takumi, no, sorry. Initial D is not coming to these states anytime soon. I've had some people at Sega ask me, it's like, why is it that there's this strong desire? Why do we get fans asking us about Initial D all the time? And I try and explain it to them. It's just, Initial D is a very hard sell to arcade operators like myself. There's a lot of options out there for racers, and usually what most operators look at first is how much money is this going to make me? How soon is it going to pay itself off? Now, to give you an idea, way back in the past, back in the 80s, back in the golden age of video games, it was typical for arcade machines to pay themselves off in 4 months. And back then, a lot of machines like Pac-Man and Space Invaders were somewhere around $3,000, $3,200 maybe. And again, they paid themselves off in 4 months. Now, in more recent years, that has been more like a year. Now, sometimes you get exceptions to the rule. I have a Cruisin' Blast sitting right over here to my left. And that was, between the two cabinets, it was somewhere a little over $14,000 for the pair. They were something like $7,200, $7,300 each, plus freight, plus tax, all that stuff. But they did pay themselves off in 5.5 months, which was fantastic. I was super happy about that. But something like the Maximum Tune, I have a Maximum Tune 5 here, which would be the most comparable thing to Initial D. I need to sit down and figure it out, but I think it took over a year for that to make its money back. And part of the problem is just it costs a lot more. And it also has this online feature where there's this monthly fee for me that I have to pay and have to buy the cards. And so these are all things that add on to the cost and make it take longer for it to pay itself off. Now, granted, when I have both of the machines working, there have been plenty of times where it's made a little bit more than Cruisin' Blast, but it's usually not making a huge amount more than Cruisin' Blast does. And so that's the same problem that applies to Initial D, is that there's no evidence that here in the States that Initial D makes a significantly larger amount of money than, say, Mario Kart or Apex Rebels or Cruisin' Blast or Fast and Furious Arcade. Now, if it did, then yes, it would be a very easy sell for our arcade operators to want to spend that extra money, because historically Initial D has been something like, what, $10,000 per cabinet? Now, these days, that's become kind of normal. Those Asphalt Legends games that I mentioned earlier, they were something like $15,000 per cabinet on the base model, and then more than that on the more expensive one. Or sorry, duh, that was a stupid thing to say. On the motion-based one, and yeah, it just becomes harder and harder when these price tags go up and up and up, and for something like Initial D to compete. So if Sega can release a version of Initial D which does make a lot more money than your more casual, cheaper racers out there, like right now the Fast and Furious Arcade that I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, the standard version, those are $13,000 each, maybe a little bit less depending on your distributor. But that's a significant investment, but that will make money, and it will pay itself off in a relatively quick amount of time. But Initial D probably won't. And so that's what Sega has to consider, because if they know that a machine that say they have to charge $15,000 per cabinet, and so it's $30,000 for two of them, or what is that for? Like what, $60,000 if you get four of them, something around there, not including shipping and tax. They have to be able to prove that sort of thing's going to pay itself off in a reasonable amount of time. Most arcade operators want 1, maybe 2 years at most as a reasonable amount of return on investment. But if it's going to take 5 years, 6 years, 10 years to pay itself off, then most of them are going to just say, sorry, I'm going to go with this other thing here because I'll make my money back a lot faster. So that's a long way of saying why Initial D is probably not coming back to the States. It is a different sort of thing in Japan, a different dynamic. They don't have quite as many games to compete with. A lot of these racers that I've discussed here aren't available in Japan. I mean, you might get a location or two that will import them in, but they generally do like to focus on their more the Japanese-made ones that the language is in Japanese as well. But that it sucks, but that's the business reality of why certain games don't show up here. Because like the stuff that we're seeing here, this is the Unis booth. A lot of this stuff, it's very cheap. But it makes a lot of money. And it has things like emoji branding on it, or crane machines. A crane machine is a pretty much guaranteed way to make your money back very quickly in this business, or redemption games. And it's like most of you who've been watching me for a long time know that I'm not a fan of redemption games, but I can't deny that they make a ton of money, and so there's pretty much no arcade out there that won't see a lot of revenue generation from crane machines, merchandisers, ticket redemption games like this. Like this Over the Edge is one of the most popular games on the market right now, and it makes good money. But a lot of the video games can make good money, but they don't always make quite as much. And so this is why a lot of arcades will have a mixture of video and redemption games, but you see more redemption games on the side. I do that. Hi, Jason. Welcome to chat. Not sure what you've caught, but did talk about Roth Thrills already. So that was earlier. But yeah, just going through the Unis booth. They do not have a lot of video games. Let me kind of jump ahead. They've been getting a lot more into crane machines. Over in parts of Asia, there have been a lot more cranes growing in popularity. Here's one of their only VR games that they have right now, Sailor's Quest VR. And this is one that, kind of like the Godzilla Kaiju Wars, that I wouldn't mind seeing available in a non-VR version, but it's kind of like Dead Storm Pirates. This Godzilla vs. Kong, it was a little strange that they didn't have this one working, because it looked like it should be working. But yeah, it was just to show it off. This is going to be out in March of next year. I did get permission to film it, so that while there were signs about no unauthorized photography, I was authorized. So, but the funny thing about this one is you could push the button on their nipples and it would go on and off. It was kind of a funny little thing there. One that I didn't get enough footage of was this Raccoon Rampage, a water game from Unis. Follows a lot of the same tropes. These water blasters all follow. I needed to get more. I should have got more footage of it. But it has 4 levels. Some of these games have like 8. But I don't know how often kids really pay that much attention to how many levels a game like that has when it's a game designed for kids. But as a gamer, I don't mind games that have replay value to them. I wouldn't really want to invest in a game that only had, say, 1 level on it or 2. Lei Master Extreme is their sequel to their bowling alley or virtual bowling game, and so it has a screen on there, and that's where all the bowling pins are at. What I was showing here in the video are these capsules. I never got an answer as to what happens if somebody gets a capsule and maybe they scan it, but then they throw it down the lane. And like that's an important question, I would think, because that's the first thing I thought about when I heard of this option, as well as I saw other operators asking that question too. So I did ask, but I just didn't get the answer on that. So when I do, I'll be sure to update the post. But let's jump over to Bigfoot Mayhem. And so this is a pure video game, no ticket redemption added to it. And this is obviously Unis's answer to Fast and Furious Arcade. And so it has the 2 65-inch screens, just like that does. It has a motion seat, just like that one does. But it has the Bigfoot branding on it. The graphics for a Unis game are really good. I mean, yeah, maybe not super above a mobile game, but I don't play a lot of mobile games, at least modern ones, but at least for most mobile games that I see that are really popular in the store, I mean, anything 3D is automatically better than they are. So because so many things like Candy Crush or Monopoly Go or whatever, or just 2D games. But yeah, you do a race, run into things, lots of chaos going on, lots of things to crush. It'd be nice to see more cars that you could run over. This game won't be out until March, so there could be some changes to it in the interim. But I thought it was decent fun. I probably will post a longer video of this for members in the member side, because I did capture more footage of this particular scene here when I was filming the booth video. It's just I had a Unis guy come and talking a little bit of shop, and so I guess didn't want to have that all public, but on the members side it should be fine. But yeah, they had a lot of games. Unis always has a lot of games at this show. Then we're pretty much done with the non-VR stuff at IAAPA 2023. You had Valley Dynamo with their latest air hockey, shuffleboard, and foosball tables. They had their jet pong, which they had last year. There was Zoom Studios, which was all focused on redemption and prize merchandising sort of games, it looked like, but I didn't stop by their booth for super long. Just what is impressive is that for a brand new company, this was the first show they'd ever appeared at. They had several new products, and so oftentimes a lot of companies only have one product that they debut with, but these guys had several, so I'm not sure what their story is. Unfortunately, it was just another one that I just didn't get a chance to spend some time on, but yeah, that was them. So anybody got any questions about any of the regular arcade pinball stuff that was at IAAPA 2023 and our games coming to arcades next year in 2024 before I get into the virtual reality and simulator stuff? Lots of scrolling. But if you do, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll get started on the VR stuff side. Well, personally, because I'm still in a bit of debt from COVID and just surviving that and getting some products from opening a second location, I'm not planning on getting anything right now. I do mention on this post at the very bottom that if I wasn't in that situation, here's the games that I probably would be focusing on. Like, best racing game for me was Apex Legends, but I would say I followed up a very close second would be Asphalt Moto Blitz DX. I really liked that one. I think it hits everything that you want in an arcade game, and so that too would be, probably be my second option or first. So I always have a hard time playing favorites. My youngest always asks me, which one of us do you love the most? I have 3 kids, and she always asks that, and I hate that question because it's like, oh, yeah, I love you all the same. But, of course, with arcade games, it's not like a child. No, I really did enjoy Apex Legends from what I played. Granted, it still has some development time to go, so we'll see what the final one is, but just my overall impressions from what I played the most at the show from racing games was Apex Legends. But again, Asphalt Moto Blitz is also there for me. I guess for my third place would be Fast and Furious Arcade Standard. So I do like that game. I know it would do well if I had it here and everything. And it is the cheapest option out of all those racing games. My best light gun game would be Mega Shot. If I could afford that, I would totally get one. It's just I think they said they were above $20,000, which is a lot for a light gun game, but it is a super impressive one. So, but I was very, very impressed with that one, and I ended up shooting more video about that, I think, than any other game at the show. Well, they are testing out Godzilla right now, but they didn't say anything to me about using me as a location test place for that. They generally test closer to home in Illinois, where all the Roth Thrills staff lives, and so that makes it a lot easier. And so that's where, with every developer, they generally test somewhere relatively close, within good driving distance, where they don't have to drive 8 hours or have to fly to see how it's going. And since there aren't any real arcade developers in Salt Lake City, that's where I usually don't get location tests. I mean, I have had some stuff before that I've tested out, and I'm always open to testing. I think I'm a good location test because I give you an idea of what things are like out on what we call the street. Not so much an FEC look, but just like, here's how your game fares in a somewhat normal location. Granted, maybe I'm not normal because I don't have any ticket redemption, so. But just best joystick game for me was Omen of Sorrow, Our Rising Chaos on the X Arcadia. I'm pretty set on getting that one. But then again, I was told about a game that's coming to X Arcadia, fighting game. That will release about the same time, and I can't say what it is yet because they haven't announced it, but holy crap, it's my eyebrows raised when I heard that, because it's like, yeah, that game's gonna do really well, and so that one will be my first pick over Omen of Sorrow. But it wasn't at the show, and since it hasn't been announced, I can't say it's the best joystick game. But maybe I'll get both if I can afford both, but I'm definitely getting this other game first. Best pinball for me was Elton John, but again, just too expensive. I'm not spending over $10,000 on a pinball machine. I don't even really want to spend $8,000 on a pinball machine anymore. I want something cheaper because they just don't make that kind of money. Because it's like I could spend $8,000 or $10,000 on a pinball machine, or I could spend $10,000-ish on a video game, and the video game will blow it away in earnings. Best redemption game for me was Zombies Ready Daddy Go, and then best VR game was Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR, which, yeah, if I had the $45,000 to $50,000 that costs, then sure, I would get it. But like I said, I would really like it if they come out with a non-VR version of Godzilla at some point. So hope that answers the question. For these types of providers, basically everybody else, you had Omega Entertainment, which had this cool looking modified shipping container that has VR rally simulators in it. I didn't come across Amusement Products LLC and the Vex free roam VR system, although I've seen Vex before. Arcade Arena. So I'm going to post a video probably later today about the Arcade Arena and show you that, but I didn't get some good footage of it. I stumbled across it when I only had like 30 minutes left at the show before I had to run and go grab my flight. So I just grabbed some quick footage. But it's like a game room where it has projection mapping on 3 walls, but it has some controls. You stand at a control panel and you play different games. And so interesting concept, but I also think it has something to do with you can go inside of the arena too. So it's like a hybrid control panel plus move your body around sort of thing. Baron Games had a new version of Birdly, which I didn't get a chance to go and try. Birdly is where you sit on a platform, lay down on a platform, and you feel like you're in a flight suit or that you're a bird and you go flying around. It's always a popular one, always has a long line, but you need to get your tickets in advance, so to speak. They have times that you need to show up at. CX Simulations, these guys always have an impressive thing at the show. You'll see video of them on the thing that I post a little later. Drink some old bubbly. Creative Works, they had a much smaller booth, which surprised me. Past several years, they've had much larger booths with a bunch of different companies, particularly with VR stuff, but they seem to cut that back a little bit. Not sure why. DOF Robotics, they announced at the show, and they also had a thing today that they have a new deal with Rovio. And let's see, it's somewhere around here. Maybe. Yeah, you can kind of see it in the background there. So they've got that coming soon, but they haven't unveiled the full thing. Yeah, I mentioned Pulp Fiction earlier in the stream, but yeah, I got a chance to play it. It's cool. It's a fun game. I don't know what the price is on it. I should look that up, but I guess that would be one of the cheaper pinball machines that's out there. Hero Zone VR is a free roam arena. I did see some people playing it and looked like fun. Hologate, I also got some footage of people playing their Hyper Golf system, but didn't see anything new for their VR side. After IAAPA, they announced that they have the new HTC Vive. I think they're called the Ultimate sensors for better tracking that they've added to their systems. Let's see, Immersive Game Box. I didn't stumble across them at the show, but they were there. InnoWise, they also have their own game room sort of thing. So there's a video of this. That's me right there and my ball spot playing this with an InnoWise employee. So this is a lot of fun. I also did attend the press conference of this, and I was handed the microphone to give some thoughts on it. So I do think this is a really cool thing. You know, obviously it's a bit higher end. It's not necessarily for an arcade my size. I mean, maybe if I had the money, I'd get one. And it has multiple games, and they're working on more games for it too. So this was a zombie shooter game. Obviously, something like this is a little bit hard to film and get the full view without setting my camera so far back that somebody will just walk off with it. But, you know, everything was fairly seamless. I guess what would be a cooler step for them to do eventually is to have curved walls instead of a hard edge at the side. But, yeah, fun multiplayer experience. These handle up to 6 players at once. And there are no wearables. That's the thing that I like about this. It's like wearables are always a little bit of an issue in the public space and obviously creates kind of a need for an attendant. Let's see, Rylix was there, although I didn't see them with anything new. Sub Soccer was at the Primetime Amusements booth, and I've done some stuff and do some stuff for Primetime, just as a disclosure there. But here's myself, or no, not myself there, playing this one. So these guys do have a coin-op version in development. It's just like I mentioned in the blog posts, from what I've seen of this one, and maybe it was here. Oops, that was not there. But this, yeah, what I would like to see them do is make a cabinet that looks sturdier. They were saying that this handles somebody that's over 200 pounds or like 500 up to 500 pounds to sit on it and it won't break, but it just has the look that where it doesn't look that sturdy, you know, especially when people are playing it kind of bounces around. So it's like if they could make those posts thicker, but also the scoreboard make it a lot larger. The one that they are showing right now for the concept is kind of tiny, and so it's like in the arcade you need bigger to catch attention, and so that might help them in that regard. But it's basically like air hockey but for soccer, so you're using your feet to get the soccer ball in your opponent's goal like that. And so cool little concept. These are available now for homes, and Primetime had told me they just shipped one to Japan, interestingly enough. For these companies, Spree Interactive, Talon Simulations, Valomotion, Virtuix, and VR Cave, I did not get a chance to really visit them. Oh, then again, I might have done that on VR Cave, so I might need to update that. Just too many videos, and unfortunately, some of the VR stuff, it's hard to remember the major differences when the only difference that you can see physically is the name and the artwork. But, you know, sometimes there's good setups with TVs that are showing what's going on there, but not always. Over at ABS Companies, which had the X-Arcadia, which you can see right on the right-hand side there, there was VR which is a self-service VR arcade. And so as you see here, I just so happened to be filming at the right time when the ABS sales guy there was showing how it works. And so it has that the VR headset up there, and there are UVC lights to sanitize it. So, you know, UVC light kills all sorts of germs and viruses, and so it does that. And then you can don the headset, grab the controllers, or I don't know if you should grab the controllers first, and then play the game. And this one had Fruit Ninja VR on it, but I could swear that I saw a different game playing earlier, and I know it's versatile enough to have different games, but sometimes multi-games don't work out in the arcades. Sometimes it is better to have just one, so that way people can just go and play that one game. But and then VRarsenal, they had a really huge black box. It looked like a giant cardboard box wrapped with black cellophane, and it was apparently it was the new holographic system that they are developing, but you can only go in if you had an invite. I didn't have an invite. I've been somewhat critical of VRarsenal in the past, so maybe that's why, or maybe I just should have asked and I didn't realize it, I guess, until it was too late. But be impressive to see what that was about. But yeah, that covers IAAPA. That covers the new games that are coming to arcades in 2024. Any other questions, comments that you guys want to get into before I end the stream? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Going once. Going twice. 3 times a lady. Or is it 2 times a lady? I can't remember that song now. No questions? No comments? What about you guys? What game that you saw in this coverage of my coverage of the show, or if you were at the show, appeals to you the most? Guess I should check to see if anybody's still watching. Or if I'm just talking at nothing. Jason, I would assume your game of the show is Godzilla VR. Guess I should have gone over to LinkedIn and shared this. Nothing? Okay. Well, if anybody wants me to do another stream talking about more games, maybe focusing on a specific company at some point, I can always do that. Or if nobody cares, that's fine too. But yeah, I do have a few more videos left to make from IAAPA as I go sorting through videos. I have found a couple of things that I didn't realize or remember that I had shot, such as one that I posted a little earlier was this VR LEO, where I was working on a video that combines all the VR stuff into one video and realized, oh, I actually shot a couple of minutes worth of this, so it would work as its own video. But there are some things where I was just running around the show and only shot it for maybe 30 seconds, since like that doesn't really work for its own long video. So but also, I guess I've just found that when I cover VR, not a lot of people pay attention. I guess I'm not the go-to guy for VR, and maybe it's because I've been a little critical of it. Like I said, I do know where it has a place. I do believe it has a place in the amusement industry, in the amusement business, but I guess I've been a little bit more into some things that don't require people putting stuff on their face, because that's just a barrier for entry for some, not for everybody, but for some. And that's where I like the Cubics concept, and there are other concepts that are a lot like the Cubics, such as that arcade arena, but maybe it's just because I'm a crotchety old man that's into your more traditional arcade games, you know, with a light gun controller or a steering wheel or a joystick or whatever it is. And so, well, since we don't have any questions, I guess that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much for your support on the site. The site just hit 17 years in existence, and so gonna keep that train going as long as I can. And thank you for watching this stream as well. Be sure to comment below at some other points as to what your games you're looking forward to in 2024 that are coming to arcades, or if you have other things you want me to talk about. I probably will do a year in review video here where I also share earnings from my arcade over the year. That'll probably be more January, so I have time to actually get all the results and see how things are going. But if there's any operator out there that wouldn't mind sharing how their games performed throughout 2023, that would be really appreciated. And I could keep the location totally anonymous if you prefer, just to get a good idea of what the games are doing right now out there. You know, having more than one location is helpful, I think, for painting that picture with happy little arcade games. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.